All right, everybody. It is Steve with Real Progress in Action. And folks, I am going to be talking to you about something that's near and dear to my heart. And these are the basic things that got you to understand the fundamentals of MMT. And it's one of those things that is such an important part of understanding the entire thing that got all these activists excited, got all these people into it. Now, all of a sudden, a few of them think they're running around experts. And the problem is they're not talking about these the fundamental points of MMT, these fundamental things that make all the other stuff matter. And because they're not talking about it, because they're not doing that, it gives that false veneer of security for groups that don't understand MMT, that maybe aren't interested in learning MMT. But because these other people that are MMT are not even talking about these fundamental issues, what they're doing is they're setting the stage for failure on the big things like a Green New Deal, like saving us from cataclysmic climate change. Okay. There is a tremendous amount of spending that has to happen and has to happen very, very quickly. And because that is where the thrust of our survival lives, right? In other words, whether it be Medicare, whether it be student debt, whether it be, a Green New Deal or a job guarantee or anything else, it's important to understand all these things have to converge at the same time as you watch the absolute climate catastrophe and this pandemic come together to create the perfect storm. Unfortunately, MMT is still not well known by everyone. Even those who have read Stephanie Kelton's great book, The Deficit Myth, are still saying things that are verifiably not correct, that put us in very, very bad situations, extremely bad situations that mean not for this moment necessary, not for this one little thing, but for the big thing, all the important stuff that we're fighting for. It puts all of that in jeopardy. I want to start with the most fundamental concept of MMT, aside from the fact that the dollar is nothing more than a tax credit to the federal government. It's nothing more than a tax credit to the federal government. But it also says that the federal government, in this case in the United States, but in other currency issuing nations, that the federal governments of those nations, the central governments of those nations, have the exclusive right to print, grow, and create as much currency as they would like. They have rules by which that currency gets spent into existence. And in the United States, those rules center around Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, which gives the power of taxing and the power to spend, the power of the purse, to Congress. And so it doesn't give it to the states. And if you go to Europe, every one of the European countries had their own currency. Some of them were pegged to a foreign currency, or some of them were pegged to the dollar. Some of them were pegged to a commodity. But the vast majority of them had what we call a sovereign, free-floating fiat currency, meaning they issue this currency. It's not tied to anything other than the productive capabilities of the nation. And so in their own currency, in their own state, in their own country, their currency is nothing more than a tax credit to them as well. It's the same thing. However, the European countries gave up the ability to create their own currency and they went to the euro. And they're not sovereign over the euro. In fact, they don't have the ability to create euros out of thin air. They have to borrow them from the European Central Bank, and they have limits on how much they can deficit spend. And so when you look at places like Germany, who are net exporters, who have a robust economy, and they're outpacing everyone in Europe, and you compare them to Greece, which is a net importing country that is absolutely been austerity ridden for many, many years. And you see people worrying about Greece as you saw the mass chaos ensue when their currency collapsed, when they realized that they needed a lot of bailouts from the European Central Bank and so forth to get out of the mess they were in. So you saw Cyprus and you saw, Yanis Varoufakis fighting tooth and nail back and forth with the ECB to try to figure out a way that they could stay solvent without just bellying up and not paying their debt. And many of us were saying, hey, go back and get on the drachma, get on the Greek drachma, get your own currency back, and then you can stay solvent and be okay. But they didn't. And so you see the net exporting countries in Europe are doing pretty damn good. But the southern ones that are net importers, they're floundering because they are not currency issuers. And they can't make up for ebbs and flows in the economy. They are literally like one of the states in the United States. And so that brings us to the large progressive agenda that we all know and love, that we all want to see all these great things happen with. If you don't understand that most basic role of currency issuer and currency user, you can't understand anything. There's nothing else that you can understand. It's such a core principle of where money starts from and who has the unlimited amount that they can do and who is absolutely cash constrained and ready to cut jobs and ready to cut spending and ready to cut funding for schools and ready to cut all these different things, pensions, you name it. And then the minute somebody says we're going to raise taxes in our state, what happens? The wealthy put the for sale sign up in front of their house and they move to Texas or they move somewhere else. The same with businesses. And so you've got states down in the South, like Texas and Kansas and others, that lure businesses in by saying, we'll cut the bottom out of the taxes. And so once they do that, not only have they reduced their own tax base to fund programs in their own state, but the states that lost the business to begin with are now left as deserts. They're now left as deserts. Schools funded by zip codes and the tax base for those zip codes. When those zip codes, that revenue dries up as it's done in Detroit and it's done in places like Lima, Ohio, etc. These areas become a picture of austerity. They become the very model of what a Rust Belt city is, and it defines the race to the bottom. But when we talk about this with other activists and other folks out there that are trying to push for state-based initiatives, they respond like we're bad people, like we're trolls. But what we're doing is we're saying, listen, this is a fact. We have the case in point in Europe right now. These states are drowning in debt. And I'm not talking about the kind of debt that they can just print away. I'm talking about the kind of debt that they've got to cut programs in order to fund their debt back to the ECB. When the United States, 49 of the 50 states have a balanced budget requirement on them. So that means they have to tax, they have to have their own bonds, they have to be invested in markets to be able to afford their stuff. And there's a hit to the economy. Then states start going belly up. Counties and cities start going belly up. And so when you have a pandemic and the tax revenues shrink, they dry up, and you have a program that is trying to be funded at the state level, well, you've given the right wing all they need to know about why that state program shouldn't be done nationally. Even though they have no idea the currency issue or currency user dynamic, I blame that 100% on MMTers that know this truth but are looking for friends in all the wrong places and have decided rather than tell the truth about this subject, they'd rather be buddies and skip the hard truths. And for those people who are in this for the short haul, that don't understand how vital and crucial this most basic element of MMT is to understanding how to do anything, you've lost the plot too. Okay? That's the problem. People want to be buddies with everybody. They want to go clout chasing. They don't want to change the world. They want to be loved by somebody. So they'll tell a lie. So they'll click like on something that's wrong. They'll partner up with people that tell them what they want to hear. But that doesn't change the physics of the way money works. There are currency issuers and there are currency users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some really, really cool stuff, starting with this thing that helped me learn MMT for the very first time. And this is an article by Roger Malcolm Mitchell, and he is not an MMTer. He's got his own little thing going on that he calls monetary sovereignty. But much of this, save for the egos and stuff, is very, very on point and very, very easy to understand. And, this was written back in 2010. So some of the references to Bernanke and stuff like that aren't really pertinent today, but this is an evergreen article. It's still incredibly valuable. So I learned so much of what I know from this article. This article was one of the big breaking out moments for me. And so was a Randall Ray article and Mosler's 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds as well. But this particular one starts out, only 2 things keep people in chains: the ignorance of the oppressed and the treachery of their leaders. Now, let me ask you a question. I just sat there and told you that the thing that, makes people wonder about, wait, what are they just being mean or whatever? No, the ignorance of our friends is what leads to these calamities. And believe me when I say this, the powers that be know this, and they're counting on the people that don't understand this to be the lead in front of the pack, fist in the air in the land of hypocrisy, leading the other people down the road. But they don't know what they're doing, and the establishment is counting on it, begging for the people that don't understand economics to jump out in front of the crowd and, like a marching band, pump their fist and pump their knees and dum da dum da dum. We're all in unity. We're all solidarity, but we're all solidarity about things we don't know. And so now we're going to all fucking die, that kind of thing, right? And so what MMT does is it helps us avoid those very pitfalls. Unless, of course, you're more interested in clout chasing, like some of our friends often are, or if you're concerned with having friends, because telling the truth to people that aren't interested in the truth yet are pushing for things that impact you and your children, well, that suddenly becomes a little different story now, doesn't it? Okay. So I'm going to keep reading this article because it is just that important. So with that in mind, we're back to this. And he says, perhaps no. I don't know why he says perhaps. It's definitely. Perhaps no words more accurately and succinctly illustrate the confusion about economics than monetary sovereignty. Now, there's some people that don't like this word sovereignty, and they have their reasons, and I understand them. But for the purposes of this discussion, the word works just fine. And so it's not a theory or a hypothesis or a philosophy. It is in its essence, it's merely a description of the way federal financing actually works. A monetarily sovereign government has the exclusive and unlimited power to create its sovereign currency. Monetary sovereignty is the foundation of economics. So the United States is monetarily sovereign. It has the exclusively unlimited power to create the dollar. China, Canada, Australia, the UK, Japan are monetarily sovereign. They have the exclusively unlimited power to create their sovereign currencies. The US government created the very first dollar from thin air. And by creating it from thin air, all the laws and rules that made the dollar possible. Being sovereign over the dollar, the US can do anything it wishes with the dollar. It can make the dollar equal to 3 euros, 2 pumpkins, or 1 partridge in a pear tree. So Bernanke and talking with Greenspan, they had some great comments here, but I'll just say them up front. Even though these are king neoliberals, they are absolutely right on the operational reality here. Bernanke, the US government has a technology called the printing press, or today its electronic equivalent, that allows it to produce as many US dollars as it wishes at essentially no cost. Alan Greenspan says central banks can issue currency, a non interest bearing claim on the government, effectively without limit. A government cannot become insolvent with respect to obligations in its own currency. Cannot become insolvent. Can never go broke, in other words, folks. And then the St. Louis Federal Reserve, as the sole manufacturer of dollars whose debt is denominated in dollars, the United States government can never become insolvent, i.e., unable to pay its bills. In this sense, the government is not dependent on credit markets to remain operational. Now, here's where it gets great. This is where you state folks should pay deep attention. Illinois, Cook County, and Chicago are monetarily non sovereign. The dollar is not their sovereign currency, and they do not have the unlimited power to create dollars. France, Germany, and Italy are monetarily non sovereign. They do not have the exclusively unlimited power to create the currency they use, the euro. That power is owned by the European Union. Fancy that. I said at the beginning of this broadcast. You, your business, and I are also monetarily non sovereign. Even Bill Gates and Warren Buffett do not have the unlimited power to create dollars. They are monetarily non sovereign because our monetarily sovereign nation has the unlimited power to create its sovereign currency. It never needs to ask anyone for dollars, i.e., your taxes don't even pay for things. Okay. It does not need tax or borrow, and it can never be forced into insolvency. It can pay any dollar denominated invoice of any size at any time. In fact, the federal government creates money by paying its bills. In other words, Congress spends it into existence by paying bills. The US has created many trillions of dollars simply by pressing computer keys, and it will continue to do so. It does not owe anyone else for creating these dollars. The US government cannot live beyond its means. It has no means to live beyond. By contrast, if the debts of France, Germany et al. Exceed their ability to obtain euros, they, as monetarily non sovereign nations, could be forced into insolvency. They did not create the euro, nor do they have the unlimited ability to pay euro denominated bills anymore, folks, any more than states have the ability to pay the bills that come to them, because states, whether it be Maine, whether it be California, whether it be Washington, whether it be Chicago, whether it be Dallas, Texas, whether it be Miami Beach, Florida, it doesn't matter. Alabama, Maryland, DC, you name it. They cannot pay any bill they need to pay in dollars because they are not currency issuers. The only way they can, in fact, pay their bills is to tax, and to tax heavily. If they try to add more programs, they got to tax more money. Okay. And the thing about states, unlike even Europe to some degree, but the thing about states is that if a person doesn't like the tax structure in their state, they can pick up and move to another state, and many do, especially the people that pay the most in taxes, the tax base, these businesses, you name it. Even though on their tax bill, a lot of these big businesses don't end up paying any tax at all in the end. Okay. It's important to understand that the tax doesn't pay for anything to begin with at the federal level. Those taxes, when they're received as a federal tax payment, are in effect destroyed, deleted, removed from the balance sheet. Okay. But at the state level, when the state takes out a credit card, when the state takes out a loan, when the state enters into a debt arrangement, the state is on the hook for that. And this is why you see pensions under siege. This is why you see roadways in ill repair. This is why you see schools charging families to participate in sports and music. This is why you see potholes all over the place. This is why you see bridges falling apart and take your own life into your own hands. This is why you see so much destruction across the United States, because people have failed to understand the currency issuer, currency user dynamic. And so a great idea, if states were in fact monetarily sovereign, which again they are not, would be for states to do their own thing and make their state the best and compete with each other and lure people in by doing better things. The problem is, because of the funding mechanism, it doesn't work that way. And so what happens when people who have it going on and they're living their lives see that taxes are going up, they have alternatives and they take them. And this is what you call flight. You see it happen in the suburbs, you see white flight from the cities, and all of a sudden you see those areas where minorities live, impoverished minorities. You see the tax base dry up and their schools, which are left to them to fund because the rich people moved away. See, at the state level, rich people matter. But at the federal level, we can make them irrelevant. But we don't. This is why people worship the ground of the wealthy, because they think that they'll just get their hard-earned tax dollars from the wealthy and everything will be okay. But wrong. The wealthy, they're mobile. They could pick up and leave at any time they feel like it. And they do. And you see people literally leave county by county. And it's as simple as leaving a zip code to bankrupt the school system. It's that fragile. And then if you look, and one of these days I'm going to take the time to actually produce all the 50 states CAFR reports, the comprehensive annual fiscal report. Okay. That position in the states shows you that so few are actually in the black. Many of them are deeply in debt. Many of them have a completely disintegrating tax base, and their schools and their public services are crap. Okay. But remember, whenever a state tries to raise taxes to do something, Texas is down there waving their hand going, "Come on down here, boy. We got a place for you." And those businesses pick up and leave, and they literally leave rust belts wherever they go. So if you don't understand what I'm saying here, I'm going to take you to another article. And this one is by Randall Wray. Now, this is very important. I hope you'll stick with me on this, because there's no point in me trying to create it out of thin air when I've got Randall Wray's words that are far better than mine would ever be. So as I go into this, I'm going to go ahead and share that. And here we go. And alternative paths to MMT. And so this is a part of Randall Wray's talk at iCape. This is January 20th, 2020. So this is a relatively recent article here. And this is a New Economic Perspectives. And what he says is, first, I'll clearly state what MMT is and then outline 4 paths that lead to MMT's conclusions: history, logic, theory, and practice. What is MMT? It provides an analysis of fiscal and monetary policy that is applicable to national governments with sovereign currencies. In other words, not like states, which are not sovereign. Okay. There are 4 requirements that identify a sovereign currency. The national government, A, chooses a money of account. B, imposes obligations, taxes, fees, tributes, tithes in the money of account. Issues a currency denominated in the money of account and accepts that currency in payment. And if the national government issues other obligations, these are also payable in the national government's own currency. There's a 5th consideration that follows from these. If a country adopts a gold standard, or dollarizes, it doesn't really have a sovereign currency because it is committed to delivering that to which it pegs. That can reduce policy space unless if it accumulates enough of foreign reserve. What difference does a sovereign currency make? We argue that the sovereign currency issuer does not face a budget constraint as conventionally defined, cannot run out of money, can always meet its obligations by paying its own currency, and can set the interest rate on any obligation it issues. Now, what do our critics accuse us of? Let's look at the top claims. Because we say sovereign governments cannot run out of money, they claim we advocate that the government can spend without limit, as if the goal of MMT is to cause hyperinflation. Because we say a sovereign government can always meet its obligations as they do come, critics claim that we say that deficits don't matter. Because we say that government spends by keystroking credits to the bank reserves, critics claim we advocate forcing the Fed to print up money to pay for all government spending. What we actually say is that current procedures adopted by the Treasury, the central bank, and the private banks allow government to spend up to the budget approved by Congress and signed by the president. No change of procedures is required. What we emphasize is that sovereign governments face resource constraints, not financial constraints. We've always argued that too much spending, whether by government or by the private sector, can cause inflation. Finally, a favorite criticism adopted by our heterodox frenemies is that MMT doesn't apply to many countries such as Somalia, the Central African Republic, the Congo, Liberia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, Ecuador, Greece, and Honduras. And because it does not apply to them, then MMT is an American first fascist policy. What do all those countries have in common? They do not issue a sovereign currency, folks. We've always made it clear what we mean by sovereign currency. MMT rigorously applies to sovereign currencies that may be the minority in terms of numbers, but they probably account for 3/4 of the global GDP. That doesn't mean that MMT scholars have ignored countries without sovereign currencies. I recommend especially the work of Bill Mitchell and Fadl Kaboub, but our main focus has been on sovereign currency. I'm not going to go in the case of developing nations now. I'm going to move on to four paths to MMT. And, for right now, I want to stop for a minute, stop speaking to that, and then focus instead on making sure you understand. Okay. What we've got is a situation where these are facts. I didn't create them. They're not Steve Grumbine facts. Sadly, atrocious people. And I mean, we're talking about the worst bottom feeders of them all try to personalize it about me, that what I'm saying is somehow or another my angle. Well, I'm giving you Randall Ray. I'm giving you Roger Malcolm Mitchell. I've given you Warren Mosler. I've given you all of them. I've given you Bill Black. I've given you Fadl Kaboub. That's not good enough for some people. Some people just want what they want, like a child that wants to take the hair dryer and put it in the bathtub with them and then turn it on. They want to do it. So damn it, I don't want to be a splitter. I don't want to create a disharmony in the family. I don't want to make my wife angry at me for fighting with the kids for telling them, no, you can't use the hair dryer in the bathtub because it could kill you. Okay. Well, you don't know that it will kill them, Steve. Certainly you can't prove that turning the hair dryer on is going to kill them. Well, the laws of electricity, the basic laws of how water conducts electricity, etc., tell me I can pretty much guarantee that nothing good is going to happen from that endeavor. Well, they live by God's grace, but that doesn't make it good. You're not going to advocate for your kid to go into the bathtub with a freaking hair dryer plugged in. So why in God's name would you advocate state-based policies that you know that their income stream, their economics, the way the currency issuer, currency user dynamic works out? Why would you advocate for something that you know inherently cannot be done by all 50 states? I mean, there's a 14th Amendment case that could be made for equal protection under the law. But there's also a 10th Amendment claim that the states can do what they want in their own way and the things they want to do. But that doesn't mean that the states have the ability to create their own currency to pay for these bills, because they do not. And so with that in mind, understand that it's not Steve Grumbine making this personal. This is Steve Grumbine taking many, many years of education from MMT theorists, developers, you name it, asking them the tough questions, because I once was not educated in this. I didn't know. I just made it my life's work to learn. Whereas this is not interesting to them. But it is interesting to me, and I've taken years and years and years to learn it. And so when I see someone advocating for a policy that will literally not be able to be done across 50 states, does not provide protection to all, because I have specific knowledge, not vague knowledge, specific knowledge of the currency issuer, currency user dynamic, I make specific claims about that. Now, Greece was not a developing country. Greece, for the record, is just no longer capable of producing the drachma. It is now on the euro, so it doesn't have the ability to offset imbalances, trade imbalance. When you export stuff and your money leaves the country or people save, when you don't have the ability to print money, and you don't have the ability to issue money because you are no longer the currency issuer. I don't care how developed you are, undeveloped you cannot necessarily pay your bills. And that's what we see in Greece because of the euro dynamic and the ECB and the Troika, etc. Flash forward to the United States again and ask yourself, what do you think would be different about activists' activities if they ingested this and took it to heart and didn't blow it off and didn't act like it was some stupid accounting trick or something like that? My guess is that instead of trolling me, you can get these two links yourself and read it from Randy Ray or Roger Malcolm Mitchell or Warren Moser. You can read their work. If you hate me, you don't like my beard, you don't like my eyebrows, you don't like my voice, you don't like the fact that I'm unafraid to talk about this in public where people don't know it, if you don't like my attitude, whatever, fuck it, read their shit. But don't ever lie. Never lie, because I'll be right there like stink on shit to let you know you lied. And that's the deal. If that makes me bad, I'm okay with that because I know what I'm fighting for. If you don't like it, if you're not into this, if it doesn't register with you, that's okay too. But don't confuse us not agreeing with me being wrong. Let's just assume you're not interested in being right. Because on this one, I've proven beyond the shadow of a doubt what I'm talking about. And it's up to each of us as activists, as progressives, as lefties that are fighting for a better world to learn the economics of building that better world so we can build a sustainable world not built on the war machine, but instead on making each of our lives better and being a better global citizen. But if that isn't interesting enough to you, then we're going to be at loggerheads because I'm not going to stop doing this. And anybody that wants me to stop doing this is probably not a good faith actor to begin with anyway. You know, if in fact I'm telling you something extremely important, okay, it's extremely important. So with that, I'll leave it to you. Make up your own mind, but I've given you the facts and I mean them. Thanks, everybody. I'm out.